What is up, everybody, and welcome. In today's video, we are going to be taking an ultra special look at this Jonas Iglesias Knives Alpha prototype. Man, this thing is a freaking beast. Before we jump in, of course, we're going to take a nice close look at all the aesthetics, and frankly, the aesthetics on this knife are something that makes it just a complete sight to behold. It is so impressive. And now a lot of you are probably seeing this full Mokutai frame right off the bat and thinking, oh yeah, well, Mokutai is cool and all, but I've seen other knives with Mokutai frames. Well, the fact of the matter is that's not what makes this knife so special. So let's go ahead and start to take a look at this frame before I get those fingerprints everywhere. Beautifully polished. Look at that heavy contouring. So comfortable in the hand. Now, this is the first Jonas Iglesias knife, Jonas Iglesias Knives knife to come across the table. And man, do I feel fortunate. This knife is on loan to us, of course, from Heels with Steel. His name is Mike, and he is the man. Now, I've gotten to handle some of Jonas's work at various different shows, blade shows. I got to handle Micah's custom pickup last year at Blade Show as well, the one with the Westinghouse micarta and beautiful mosaic Damascus blade. That thing is super sick. And so, obviously, Jonas has been getting very popular. I don't think many of you are going to come into this video wondering who he is or the kinds of knives he makes. And so obviously he's somebody that we've really wanted to have come across the table to take a look. And frankly, I think this knife is the perfect example because, Jonas makes a lot of knives and he does them sort of up the tiers of complexity and in terms of the materials and everything. He makes a lot of knives that are just standard titanium frame lock folders. And while that's all fine and dandy, I think this knife really shows us sort of how far he's come as a knife maker and has a lot of details that I really, really am looking forward to pointing out to you guys. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, as I mentioned before, we are looking at this full Mokutai frame. You can see the contouring is quite substantial. Let's actually look at it from this angle. Very steep contouring, love that. And you can see how smooth and how good of a job he's done with these little cutouts for your finger to be able to close the knife. You can just see how all these edges are so incredibly rounded. All the transitions are so smooth. And just what a beautifully comfortable frame. So that's something I really appreciate. Now, of course, we have to take a look at this ridiculous Sanmai blade. Now, I don't think I've personally ever seen a Sanmai pattern utilized to this effect, but I love this, where you have sort of the core exposed on either side of the blade with the pattern down the middle, and just the way that this particular pattern works out such that, there's these little divots of core. Just looks so freaking cool. See, it's got a beautiful satin polish on that core. The light really plays with this one. It's pretty magnificent. On this reverse side, you can also sort of get a picture of what that grind looks like. So you can see this beautiful grind line coming up through here and sweeping up forward. So even though it is a Tanto, you can see that grind is quite unique. Really special. Very cool to see those sort of hidden grind lines among such a fantastic blade. But again, materials are not what make this knife special. So we've now taken a look at a gorgeous Sanmai blade and a beautiful full Mokutai frame. Mokutai, Timascus, whatever. Not really sure which one it is. What makes this knife so special, in my opinion, and such a great example of Jonas's work is all of the zirconium. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar, zirconium, obviously many of you have seen it in this capacity. I'll get out my little pen from MCM, Matthew Martin. Now, this is a zirconium tube, and you guys are used to this color, right? This is zirc. You would see this, and you'd be like, oh, that's zirconium. It's gray. It's kind of this dark gray. Now, sure, we have zirconium in that capacity as well. You can see those thumb studs, this clip right here, normal colored zirconium. However, there's a few other things that need to be considered when talking about working with zirconium. One, some of you may know this, that it is incredibly flammable. The dust from zirconium is Spark City, so managing the metal is kind of a nightmare in and of itself. And so when you start talking about custom pieces of zirconium, you have to remember that making them is kind of a pain in the ass. And so these thumb studs, actually, that are on a lot of his knives, I don't know if he's turning them by hand on a lathe or how he's making them, but these are custom zirconium thumb studs made for the knife. Now, that in and of itself is something to admire and appreciate, to be quite frank. Now, in addition to that, look at this pivot. What he's done here is he's taken a custom manufactured zirconium pivot. He heat colored the entire thing. It's got a bit of an orange peel finish and then heat coloring to that dark gray zirconium that you're used to. And then he used a hand mill to drill out these little sections to turn it into the shape of a star. Now, he's done that on both sides, and what that's left is these exposed cutouts with, machining marks. And so he's got this super cool two-tone zirconium pivot that's really all made, by hand, obviously using machines and tools, but by hand, to give this really cool two-tone effect. And now anybody who takes the time to work with zirconium and do interesting things with it, right off the bat, they're already like a favorite for me, because I just feel like a lot of makers just go, I'd just rather not, you know what I mean? And they don't even bother in the first place. So to see a maker doing this is super cool. Now, some of you who watch the channel may also be familiar with this knife. Now, this is an Andre Thorburn L42 with custom hand-engraved Julian Marshall bolsters. Now, the interesting thing is, at first glance, you might think these bolsters are titanium, but the matter of fact is, they're zirc. You can see this underlayer is dark. That's zirconium. Now, you might be thinking, but that's bright blue and purple. Zirconium is gray. So again, for the uninitiated, zirconium actually does undergo a similar coloration process when being sort of heat colored or heated up, really, as titanium. It sort of goes through that spectrum in the same way that titanium does. A little bit of gold, sort of blue, purple, but that spectrum, it runs through the spectrum very quickly. And so if anybody's ever, messed around with anodizing titanium in their backyard with a torch or something, you'll know that it sort of takes a minute. You have to get the metal pretty heated up before it starts anodizing at all. And then, you get that gold. And while it does sweep through the colors relatively quickly, if you keep that torch on the tie, there are definitely clear moments where you're like, all right, this is gold. I want it to be a little bit more gold. I'm going to wait 2 more seconds and pull the torch away. Just that color transition happens in a stable and visually apparent way. However, when working with zirconium, it sort of just flies through that color spectrum and really wants to get to this dark gray super fast. And so that's why you don't see a lot of flame-colored zirconium, because it's very just difficult to manage. Now, maybe you have seen zirc where it's like gray, but it's polished and it has a bit of green and purple undertone to it. And that works just as well. That's just a little bit later in the coloring process, so it's still got that gray, but some of those iridescent colors are left behind. But really, before you get to that point, the zirconium, for the most part, again, it's not quite as clear or as vibrant or as obvious as titanium, but that Zirc will sort of go through that rapid color transition. And so when a maker is able to, for example, really hone in on colored zirconium, it's always something that I'm super impressed by, because it's not as simple as a titanium knife that you can put in an electromagnetic bath and sort of anodize to an exact voltage, or that you have sort of that really solid control and that clear spectrum with titanium using a torch. If you want to flame color zirconium, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's kind of a bitch. So for a maker to do that successfully is not only really awesome, but to see them do something like this, in my mind, is unbelievable. Let's see if we can get some focus in here. So what you can see here is we have a orange peeled zirconium backspacer, and you can see there's these 3 little divots, that there's a full divot and then a polished bevel around the tip, and you can see some blue and purple in there. Now, not only can you see blue and purple, you see a super consistent coloration through all 3 of these dots. Now you can see sort of a light blue around that bevel ring, and then sort of a dark blurple in the recesses. So likely he colored this whole thing, dark gray, and then machined these divots in, and then was able to maintain that consistent purplish blue through each of these dots in a second heat coloring process. You can also see this beautiful floating backspacer matched perfectly to the contour of the frame. And we were talking again earlier about custom parts. These do look like zirconium screws as well, which are presumably hand-fashioned. And, I guess I just did a whole lot of talking for something that might not seem super substantial to people, but the fact that this is solid zirconium with this coloration process is a real stellar example of Jonas's understanding of the materials that he's working with. Anybody can buy a hunk of zirconium and hold it up to a grinder and make it into a shape and then hit it with a torch and color it black. Anybody can do that, if they have the tools at hand. But not anybody can just make a backspacer like this and get zirconium to bend to their will in such a fabulous and consistent fashion. And so I really the reason that I like this knife so much, and I almost wish that it wasn't Mokutai and Sanmai, because even though it's so beautiful and it looks so gorgeous, I feel like, again, anytime I bring up how much I like this knife, people just assume it's because it's a full dress knife, and that really has nothing to do with it. This could have been plain titanium and a plain satin blade, but if it had all the same zirconium features and hardware that it has, I would be just as impressed. I easily think that the work with zirconium is what stole the show on this knife, and I would just love to see more of that interesting work come out of Jonas's workshop. He's been making some really great knives lately. I look forward to having more of his stuff on the table in the future as well. I got my buddy Aaron, HK Winger. He's out there collecting these knives now, and he's got a handful, and it's just always a joy to try his knives at shows, and just the work that he does with bending materials to his will is a really substantial and really special thing to behold. So I definitely recommend checking out Jonas's work. It is no secret that he is a fabulous maker when he is able to, again, just make these things work in a fashion that he finds manageable. And thanks so much for watching, guys. Of course, if you'd like to see beautiful pictures of this knife, you can do so by following me on Instagram at tovarishworks. Of course, you can follow the owner at heelswithsteel on Instagram. And of course, if you'd like to reach out to me for any reason whatsoever, you can do so by emailing me at tovarishworks@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.